Hello and welcome back, everyone. TGIF. I hope everybody's had a good week. Welcome back for another Joy of Digital Painting lesson. And today we're going to be covering how to digitally paint realistic grass. And this is the picture that I'm going to show you how to paint today. So if this looks like something you'd like to learn how to do, why don't you stick around and let's get started. Okay, so anytime you're painting digitally, the question always remains, should I use a custom brush or should I use a good old hard or soft round brush? And sometimes you can use either one. Sometimes it makes more sense to use a hard round brush. And sometimes, including painting grass, it makes absolutely the most sense to specifically use a custom brush. Because not only does it give you a fantastic result, but it makes things so quick and so much easier, you won't even believe it. I mean, like 50 times faster. So we're going to create our own custom brush today, and then I'll show you how to adjust the brush settings and things to make it look like you want. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is I've already created a little bit of a canvas here today. You can see that I created just a modest size canvas, 1400 by 1000 pixels. Put a basic sky in there and a basic, ground plane with some dark, grassy area there. That's where we're going to paint our grass over. But first thing we need to do is to create our custom brush. So what we're going to do is I've got to create a small canvas to make my brush out of. So I'm going to create, I usually create a 500 by 500 pixel canvas to create my brush on, and that's good for most, medium-sized canvases, even getting into the larger canvases. But if you're going to be painting on a really large canvas, you might want to use a larger brush, like maybe 1000 by 1000 pixels or something. It just depends on how much your computer can handle. Up until recently, I had a pretty old computer, so I really couldn't handle the larger brush and canvas sizes. So 500 by 500 usually works really well for me. Okay. So you can see our new canvas has popped up here. I'm going to select my hard round brush. I'm going to be on 100% flow for this. And the brush is a little too big. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just create essentially, oops, I forgot to mention you have to be on complete black. You want to be on complete black for this, and I'll explain more about that in future videos. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create literally one blade of grass. Okay, something like that. Oops, why is it doing that? Oh, because I have to use white. Basically, why is it doing that? Oh, sorry. Okay, I forgot you have to do this differently when you're, okay, something like, yeah, something like that. That should work. Okay, so we have our basic blade of grass. Actually, you know what? I'm going to redo this. Just, not quite happy with that. Let's see. Okay, something like that. Okay, something like that. So once you have your basic blade of grass shape, you're going to go up here to Edit, Define Brush Preset. And the dialog box will come up here. And I'm just going to call this Grass Brush. Oops. Grass Brush. Okay, now once you do that, then you can see now my brush tip has changed. The brush tip now looks like this blade of grass. So I can go ahead and close this out. Okay, so right now, okay, this is what our brush looks like. Obviously, that's not usable yet. We have to do a few things to the brush settings before we can actually really use this brush. So I'm going to bring my brush settings panel in here. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the spacing. We have to change this so that the individual blades of grass are far enough apart that you can actually make them out. Okay. Okay, something like that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is we're going to go in here to shape dynamics. Now this is where the brush really, really shines once we get these settings done. So for grass, I usually put the size jitter on about 20%, 20 to 30%, something like that. And I take the pen pressure off specifically. And I'll talk more about that in coming videos. You don't have to mess with minimum diameter. For angle jitter, I usually put it on like 2 or 3%. That makes it so that each blade of grass is slightly off angle from the one before it. Gives it just a little bit more variation. Roundness jitter you don't have to do anything with, and I think we're good other than that. Okay, so at the moment, okay, so it's starting to look better, but we're still not quite there, but that's okay. Because now we're going to go into this next tab called scattering. So we want to click this option here, both axes. This will make our scattering, our brush tip, it'll scatter both horizontally and vertically, and that's what we want. And then we're just going to try it. Put it at 76%. And then I'm going to just test it out. Okay. Let's go up to 80%. Now, if you adjust count, that will basically make more grass. Like your brush tip, more will come out. So if it's on 1, it'll do something like that. If it's on 3, see, it's just more dense. So you can play around with that. Just put it on whatever seems right for you for that particular subject, but I'll keep it on 2 for now. And then count jitter, for now we won't mess with that. Okay. Now, the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to go down here to color dynamics. Now, this is really, really cool. Foreground, background jitter. So what this means is that when we pick our foreground and background color, it's going to be like a lighter green and a darker green probably for grass, or like maybe a light yellow and a mid-value green or something. But what this does is this will allow the foreground and the background color to kind of mix together. So sometimes when you drag the stylus, some of the blades of grass are going to be the foreground color and some are going to be the background color. So it really allows more of a natural kind of look to it, whereas everything is so, in other words, everything is not exactly the same color. Okay. Hue jitter, we're not going to mess with it right now. And then for saturation and brightness jitter, you can have that. You can mess around with that a little bit. That just basically makes it so that each blade of grass is a little bit more or less saturated and a little bit more or less bright. So these are definitely good to kind of play around with, but it just kind of depends on what you're painting at the time. So I'll put them on 15%, something like that. All right. So I'm going to drag that back over to my other monitor. And let's just see. Okay. I still have to change my background color. It's still in blue from the sky earlier. Okay. So I want this to be like a really happy scene. I want it to be some really bright, kind of green grass with maybe the sun shining on it. So it's kind of really bright green or maybe some yellow in there. So the first thing that we have to keep track of now that we have our brush created and ready to go is, since we're going to be painting grass and we're going to be painting like this large wide open field, we have to take into account what is called atmospheric perspective. Okay. Which means that, among other things, if you're painting something far away, obviously it's going to be smaller. And if you're painting something closer up, it's going to be bigger. So just kind of keep that in mind. And we're always going to paint from the background to the foreground. Okay. So to paint that really far grass, oops, painted on the wrong layer. So as you can see, by the way, I put the grass base layer, that dark green that we're going to build on, I put that on its own layer. So if I turn off that layer, it's just the sky. All right. But we're going to create the grass texture on a layer above that. So it's still a little bit. Okay. And what I usually do first is I usually put the darker value in first. So I'm just going to start painting this far grass in. And I'm not going to get too picky about, my making sure my perspective is right and everything. I'm just, oops, I'm going to move my microphone here a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I'm just painting the very farthest bit of grass. And I've got pressure sensitivity. I turned it off, but this, for some reason, Photoshop lately has been not working right for me. It's been ignoring the fact that I don't want pressure sensitivity on, but that's okay. Okay. And we're just going to basically just go over the canvas. I mean, look at that. We're just not hardly doing anything, and already we've got all this grass created. And if some of that base layer shows through, that's fine too. That's why I picked the color that I did, in case, in fact, I'll just deliberately skip a few areas so that that base layer can still show through. See, look at that. Already we're getting some really nice looking grass. Okay, now we're getting closer, so I'm going to change the size of my brush a bit. And just keep going. And you may have to go back and adjust like your color dynamics a little bit, or you might want to change your foreground background jitter, the size of your brush, whatever, but just experiment. That's how you get used to your tools. I mean, look at this. This is so easy. It's criminal. I'm going to make the brush even bigger. Okay, something like that. Look at that. Look at that. Nice, happy, bright green grass. Okay, but that was just the darker layer. Now we're going to really sparkle this up. We're going to really brighten this up. So I'm going to go back to my smaller brush. And you could do this on a separate layer if you wanted. You could do like your darker layer on one layer and then your lighter layer on one layer, however you want to do it. I'm just going to do it all on the same layer for now. And we just keep going. Now, if you're finding that the grass, when you're moving your brush, if you're finding that it's creating too much of like a line, like a hard line, no problem. Just go back up to your shape dynamics and go back up to your scattering and just increase the scattering a bit, which I think I'm going to do. I turn it up to 133%. And now it's not creating so much of a line. Increase the brush size a bit. Okay. And sometimes, you'll get this in a couple of layers. You'll just really nail it. And other times, you're messing with the color, you're messing with your values and stuff, and it just doesn't quite look right. And so it might take you, 5, 6, 7 layers to really get it to look the way that you want. No problem. It'll still only take a few minutes. It's really fast, as you can see. Even if I have to completely redo this, it wouldn't take more than a few minutes. I mean, look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Completely realistic, happy looking grass. Bright, happy, sparkly grass. Okay, so I think that looks great. But one thing that you could do is you could come down here into your color dynamics. Let's say that you just wanted a little bit more contrast. Well, go back into your foreground background jitter and just crank that up. Crank it way up to like 70 or 80%. And now it's going to allow more of those colors, from the foreground and the background. They're going to you're going to see more variation there. Okay, so I'm just kind of playing around. It's basically done. I think that's basically how to do it. Like I said, if you want, you can, if I wanted to, if this was a really sunny day, I could maybe make the grass a little bit more yellow rather than green. But I think this looks good. So that is how to paint grass using a custom brush. So if you have any questions, first of all, anytime you're watching the videos, if you have any questions, go ahead and send me an email. I'll leave a picture of my email at the end of this video, a picture of my email address so that you can email me. Not only to ask me questions about the videos, but if you have a request specifically about something that you'd like me to cover, let me know. It might be something that I'm going to cover anyway, and I can maybe move it ahead in the rotation. It might be something that I have never thought about covering, but that I would love to cover. So just let me know, and I'll see if I can fit it in. All right? Well, I hope you guys like this lesson. Very quick, easy lesson on how to paint some really realistic looking grass. And stay tuned for the next video, which I think is going to cover either painting distant foliage or how to paint tree bark, one of the two. I'll see you then. Have a good weekend, guys.